Hi everybody, Colin Stevenson here, joined again by my hero, John Lenhart. Hi John.
Hi.
Today we've got part 2. We spoke to you in our last video regarding the amygdala, where we feel trauma, where trauma comes from. Today, John is going to run us through how we can repair that, repair the amygdala and allow us to, mute the trauma and allow us to move forward without the triggers affecting our life. So John, if you can please tell us some more, please.
So the first step in fixing the amygdala is to not trigger it in the first place. The thing is we've learned that trauma, in the previous episode, that trauma, what the person has experienced in their past, if it comes back up, that can trigger them. There are 2 other reasons people trigger. One reason is people get bullied or they get talked to in opposite of the communication guidelines we shared. Remember, make a statement on yourself, ask questions of others, answer questions. When people make a statement on you, don't ask you any questions and don't answer any questions. That can cause people to trigger. A lot of these guys who are in jail, they basically got a bad or worse cause, we call it, and they responded with a bad or worse cause. That's why they're in jail. Second reason is if people talk in opposition to your uniqueness. So Colin's compassion server, I'm administrator teacher. If you call Colin a know-it-all, it's not going to bother him at all. That bothers teachers. When I was a kid and I got called a know-it-all, it made me want to go after people. So realize there's 3 reasons why people trigger, not just one. All the training that's out there teaches the one. So when we go into the schools, when these kids trigger, they either need to be restrained, someone has to put their arm on them, or secluded. They need to be stuffed in a room. We had a kid who had 88 restraints or seclusions in the first 3 months of school. So that's more than one a day.
Yeah.
And it was with a teacher who had the typical trauma training. They moved him to a teacher who had our 3-dimensional training, and he went the next 6 months with 0, Z-E-R-O, restraints or seclusions. I could tell you about a middle school EBD classroom, self-contained, that had 69 restraints or seclusions. They took our course. The next year they had 14. The next year after that, they had 0. The next year after that, they had 0. Now, I have actually had school systems try to suppress this data because they don't want people to realize that they have probably been causing the restraints or seclusion. So notice, we have people who would rather the kids continue to get restrained and secluded than, and look right, than actually help these kids. I've contacted newspapers and they will not respond to any of this. So the first thing I will tell you is if we are using the communication guidelines and we're understanding a person's uniqueness, we shouldn't have any of these triggering issues. And especially if you understand your kid's uniqueness, there's no reason that they would be having these triggers. But if you use those 2 things in a setting, like the first time they ever went to the park and you made a bunch of statements on them, guess how they're going to feel about the park from now on?
Yep. Now, the reason I believe that they try to suppress the information would be because they would have to admit for the whole of time they've been hurting people. Now,
right. So they're instead they're going to continue hurting people. They can say they didn't know, and they didn't know, but now they know, and I know not to.
We know, and this is the thing, and that's why some people will take on what we say, and others will try and ignore it, understanding that we're right, but then can I keep on going the way they're going because they don't want to cause any conflict of interest, shall we say.
Right, but there's a big 0 to 4 movement. There's a big movement, that about helping these kids under 4 years old, because that's where a lot of these first encounters are. If you think about it, if you have a kid under 4 years old, you want to make sure the first time they experience anything, it's the best possible experience. Well, it's not just the experience. It's not just being a dog rushing at them the first time they see a dog. It's how they were being talked to or treated while they had that first experience, because that gets lumped in with it. So one of the things these 0 to 4 aren't realizing is there's two other sources of traumas to these kids' brains under 4 years old that are clouding their first experience with everything. But they want to use this affective cause or analysis approach to understand their brain. We have this synthesis or from the truth up that we talked about in our psychology series. In fact, the first edition of our psychology series, and this gets completely ignored. So again, this is another thing where Dr. Ellie Harper the psychologist could be saying, look, psychology needs this information because they're missing out on all of the sources of trauma.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I love about Dr. Harper, while we're on the subject of her, she felt that as much as she was doing the best that she could at her job, that there was more that could have been done. And that is why she wants to add the flow-cess model for the mind and brain, the only one that we're aware of in the world, to psychology. It's not to put anyone down or to expose anything bad. It's to make better. Now, if we're able to make better and we're able to help people get over trauma, rather than talk about it, at the moment, people feel that when they talk about trauma, they latch onto it. They're just going to secrete the same, chemicals in their body. They're going to go through it. And then they'll say, I feel a release because I understand. Then they go away. It happens again. And then they're back in the hole. What we're wanting to do and what Dr. Harper's wanting to do is allow that to be muted so that they stay out of the hole and carry on moving forward.
Right. So the key to fixing that is to first of all, figure out what's causing the trigger. What is causing the trigger? And we need to find out, when do you trigger the most? When I help people, I say, hey, over the next week, write down all the instances where you trigger. Someone cut me off in traffic, different things like that. Then I say, what do you want your response to be? See, in the moment, you cannot fix a trigger in the moment. What I like to say to people is when somebody's triggering fight, flight, freeze, it's a loss. You don't want to fix it now then. And there's so many people telling people, well, when you trigger, use your, strategies. And it's like, if you're truly triggering at 320, you don't have your conscious brain. And that's why that doesn't work. You have to address this before. So when someone's triggering, it's a loss. Don't make it a bigger loss. Don't interact with them. Leave them alone for 60 to 90 seconds. Make sure they're not going to hurt themselves. And then you could talk to them. The only way to fix this trigger is when they're not triggering. And when they're not triggering, you say, what do you want your response to be? And I like to say to people, there's 3 responses. You can walk away. There's nothing wrong with walking away. I always tell these kids, if anybody tells you you can't walk away, they're forcing you to go through a situation where you're going to fight and you're going to end up in jail. You can walk away. That's not only physically, that's emotionally. You can shut down. That's walking away emotionally. You can ask for help. If you think about Alcoholics Anonymous, that's what they literally do, is they say, call a support person, call a friend. You could ask for help, which is kind of a way of pausing, or you can ask a question. So there's a 4th way. You and I did a whole show on this. You could forgive the person. Normally, when I'm first helping people, this is the first thing I do, is I focus on the first 3. And what I like to say is, you want to pick one of these 3, and you want to pick a physical response. So what you want to do is you want to say, I take a deep breath and I ask a question. I clap my hands and I walk away. I shrug my shoulders and I ask for help. Because what's going to happen is we're now going to rehearse it. And the physical response is easier to do than the rest of it. But once you do the physical, you don't have a choice. So remember, the amygdala doesn't know reality. So what I'll tell people is, I'll say, now I want you to imagine the situation again. And if you talk out loud, it's even better, but you don't have to. And when you start feeling, and you're going to feel that trigger when you imagine it, because your amygdala's in there, Then you say, because now you're from your conscious brain over here ahead of time, because you're in control of it. You're telling your amygdala consciously what's happening. Then you say, and then I shrugged my shoulders and asked for help. If you do that 3 times, your amygdala thinks you really did that. See, if your amygdala only has you doing this bad response, it doesn't have a choice. And all we're doing is building a gap in there. So I have a friend, and every time he took his son back to his ex, he called her the B word every single time. He triggered. And I was in a room with men and women when he was sharing this, and I said, what's the reason? He goes, I don't know. I said, close your eyes. I'm going to be your ex. Okay, I am not a woman, but it didn't matter to his amygdala. I am being his ex. So we go through the whole scenario. He brings the kid back. I say some things. He says some things. I say something, and he blurts it out. And I'm like, okay, why did you do that? Everybody in the room is shocked. Like, why are you yelling at John? He's not your ex. Doesn't matter. The amygdala is in that situation, and that's what it's going to do. And he was shocked he even said it. He goes, I don't know why I'm doing it. I go, let's do it again. And I tried to come at it a little differently. He did it again. And he goes, I feel like you're saying I'm stupid. And I said, do you think you're stupid? Because if you think you're stupid, that's a conscious brain thing, and we're going to attack it over here. And I said, because yelling the B word at a woman makes you look stupid. So you do look stupid. Probably don't want to do this. So he's like, no, I don't think I'm stupid. I said, what do you want to do? And so he came up with something. He rehearsed it. What has it been? It's been like 9 years. He's never called her that since. Gone from that first. He rehearsed it 3 times. Now he's got this space, and he can choose how he's going to respond. He still feels it, but over time he feels it less and less. But what's really happening is amygdala is going, well, we used to always respond with this, but the last 3 times you did this, which one do you want to do? And all we're doing is we're building a space. And that's when people realize they have triggers. Oh my goodness, when that thing happens, I can't stop myself from, that's a trigger. Let's build a space in there. You're still going to feel it, but now you have ability to respond.
That's wicked. So how would we do it? Obviously, that's a trigger in a conversation. Could you imagine if it was like different scenarios? So say the last video we spoke about the boy that went fishing with the uncle, and the 5 o'clock shadow and the sweat and the cologne and the fishing jacket. How would we be able to rehearse something like that? So obviously we've all got different triggers. I know mine's somebody telling me you're not helping. That's a trigger for me, because all I want to do is help. So that's one of mine. And we've all got certain ones, like yours is the know-it-all one. So maybe in compassion server, it's you're not helping. And I'm like, it's all I want to do is feel and help. So for somebody, whether it was a physical action that happened when they were younger, and it's still affecting them as they go older through relationships or situations, how would they rehearse that if they were on their own to kind of talk themselves through it?
So if you're talking about this specific example, so because there's 2 ways to attack this, because we have a model for the mind and the brain. There's more than one way to attack this, if you understand that. So let's talk about the situation, because I teach these teachers to situationally help these kids. And the example I'll give you is this, is I was teaching a class, and there was a police officer in the class, and he said, is this an example of rehearsal? So they got a call, him and his partner, to go to this house because the next door neighbors said they were shooting guns off in the house next door. So when you shoot guns off in your house, that upsets your neighbors. They'll call the cops. Okay. So they show up, they pull up, and they get out of the car, and they're about to step on the property. And he said, my partner said, what are we going to do if that door flies open and the guy's got a gun? And he said, okay, I'm going to draw and get behind this wood pile over here. You draw and get behind the car. The other guy said, okay. He said they took 1 step on the property, and all he remembers is he was behind the wood pile drawn, And he says, to this day, him and his partner argue who drew quicker. Because he doesn't remember anything. He took a step and he was behind the woodpile. Because when they took a step, the door flung open, guy had a gun. Now, what happened? That was rehearsing. When this guy says, hey, if that door flies open, there's a gun, I'm going to draw and get behind the woodpile. And the amygdala goes, oh, they opened the door, it was a gun, you went behind the woodpile. The amygdala thinks he actually did that. So when it happened, his amygdala goes, oh, let's just do what we just did a minute ago. We'll do it again. Because it doesn't know reality. So it made him do it. The partner saying, okay, is accepting that rehearsal. So I'll teach teachers, this kid, it's like every time this kid takes that kid's scissors, he punches him. And I'll say to the teachers, you can say to him, hey, what do you think about if he takes your scissors today, you raise your hand and you ask me a question. And if the kid says, okay, it happens. The teacher's like, it happened. The kid took his scissors and he raised his hand. Well, because he said, okay, you got to get him to say, okay. Now, some teachers, I say, be careful. They want to be more kind. They want to be more open-ended. Hey, if he takes your scissors today, how do you think you could respond? I could kick him in the head. You just rehearsed the kid to kick him in the head, So you might want to be careful about doing an open-ended question. You might want to stick closed-ended, but that's what you could do. You could say, hey, next time, what do you think about the next time you walk in the store and have this trigger? You take a deep breath and recognize your surroundings. If he says, okay, that would work. The other way to do this is to understand the principle. So you mentioned they want to help and they want to do all this stuff. What is the principle behind why you triggered? For him, it was lack of control.
Yeah.
So if we only rehearse the setting, we only cover the setting. But the reason for the trigger is a principle.
Yeah.
If you rehearse the principle, like my friend said, I feel like she's calling me stupid. Oh, whenever anybody whenever you feel like someone's saying you're stupid, do you trigger? Yes. So instead of just rehearsing away the situation with the ex, if he rehearses away people making him feel stupid or calling him stupid, he covers all of that. Everybody has 3 basic triggers. Everybody has 3 areas, principles in their life that cover, I'm going to say 99% of the triggers. If you can find those 3 areas and rehearse them away from a principle basis, they're going to be completely gone. And that's the goal, is to try to figure out down to a principle. Now, if you don't rehearse, you're going to do what you always do, even if they have a good response. And again, I'm going to go back to Modern Family. I talked about it in the last episode. So there's this scene in Modern Family. Jay is married to Gloria, a younger wife. He used to be married to Deedee. Shelley Long plays Deedee, an older woman. And every time Deedee sees Gloria, she strangles her. She triggers every time and she strangles her. And so what happens is Deedee has decided she wants to say, I forgive you, or she wants to ask for forgiveness. She wants to say, I'm sorry, admit what she did wrong, and she wants to ask Gloria for forgiveness. So she's in the room. Gloria and Jay come in, now whole family's sitting there, and Deedee stands up and she does the perfect, we would say, admittance. She admitted her wrong. I know I didn't do this. I know why I did it. I was under medication. I don't want to do this. She does it perfectly. And she says, you're probably going to want to punch me. She's rehearsed every bad response that Gloria could have. She didn't rehearse one response that Gloria could have, which was, I forgive you.
Yeah, I forgive, the good response.
Well, why would she need to rehearse, I forgive you? Well, if she doesn't rehearse that, then the amygdala is going to do what it always did. So she does this big admittance. She says, you're probably going to want to punch me, all this stuff. I'm so sorry. And Gloria's had another situation. She goes, there's been too much revenge. I forgive you. And Deedee goes, wow, I didn't expect that, meaning I didn't rehearse that response. She goes, I don't know. I just feel like strangling. He goes and strangles Gloria. And I can't tell you the number of people I have helped and said, you need to rehearse them having a good response, especially guys with their dads. You need to rehearse your dad handling it well. He's not going to handle it well. Okay. Sure enough, they go to have an interaction with their dad. Their dad handles it well, and they still yell and scream and fight with their dad. So you need to rehearse if you're talking about going to talk to somebody, you need to rehearse all the responses, even their good response. Otherwise, your amygdala it's just going to do it. And you're going to go, I don't know why I did it. I can tell you why. Your amygdala only had that response in its library because you didn't put another response in there through rehearsal.
So rehearsing's the way forward now. This would make a massive difference to people with PTSD as well, wouldn't it? So
this is the first thing I do. PTSD is damage in 3 areas. So what's happening is when someone has PTSD, they have experienced or witnessed a traumatic event that damages their amygdala, their unconscious, and their conscious. And we all have PTSD.
Yep.
And the way I help people over PTSD, because these kids all have PTSD that I'm dealing with in schools, but I've helped veterans, I've helped other people. We've offered this to veterans. And these veterans affairs places, they never take us up on it. And they're not helping these people dissolve all of this. But again, we have model for the mind and the brain, but maybe they're afraid that they would be admitting they're wrong all this time. But we can do this. And the first thing I do is I get rid of these, because the problem is this is the most severe. There was a TV show called The Slap, like 3 or 4 years ago. And sometimes I show this video to people where this guy's, it's 40th birthday, the family's coming over. He's a nice guy and everything, but his nephew is swinging a bat around his kids. And he says, stop it. He grabs the bat and he grabs the kid and he goes, why don't you listen to people? The kid kicks him and he slaps the kid. And the entire season is those 3 seconds. He had an amygdala moment for 3 seconds, and the implications are forever. So the things that happen when we trigger, they're 3 to 5 seconds of loss of control, and people can go to jail for it. People can spend months fixing it. So the first thing I always do with a PTSD person is let's rehearse away those triggers, because those are the things where people put themselves in a hole. And then we can deal with the unconscious and the conscious brain after that. But if you don't rehearse, if you don't get rid of all 3 areas for PTSD, it's like you did nothing at all, because it's going to crop up in the other 2 or 1 area.
That's mega, because obviously when we have a trauma, when we go through it, if we're triggering all the time, the PTSD is still going to be there, which obviously the amygdala is still going to go off, which means it will always be. And we can, as I say, we can speak about it. We can go to counselling, we can go to psychiatrists, we can have medication, we can do all of these things. But with the only way that actually kind of mutes it down and allows it to process differently would be to just completely rehearse it.
Right. So the last story I'll tell you here is I was going into this self-contained class. We were in ABD middle school, and I was going in once a week. And apparently, and I was going in the afternoon, apparently they had a student in there that I had never met, because she never made it through, or at least on the days I came in, she couldn't make it through the entire day without triggering. So what happened was, and this is kind of something else we're going to talk about later, is that she happened to be in the class, but she was having a bad moment. And the teacher pulled her into the back room and said, come with me. So I went there, and she had her head down, and the teacher said, can Mr. Lenhart be here? And right away, I knew she was going to look at me and read me. She was going to let her unconscious read me. Because what's going to happen is these kids from trauma, they look at your face and they can tell whether you want to be there or not, whether you want to help them or not. And in my brain, I'm going, I want to help you. And she looked up and looked down and said, yeah. And I knew she was reading me that quickly. So they did all this stuff. And what happened was, I said, after they talked about this, I said, can I talk to you? And that the first thing I did was, right?
You did an intangible driver's test.
First thing, step one, right? Step one to step two. We have step one to step two. Psychology does not. Step one is the uniqueness of the individual. Step two is the thought process they're in. So step one. So I give her the test. Exhorter-Teacher.
Wow.
Yeah. So this is like the Tony Robbins character. So I said to her, I said, so what you want to do is you want other people to be jacked up. And you do it by explaining stuff. And what I did was I drew a line on this board and I said, people can be in a hole, and I had a frowny face. And then I had a mountain. And I said, you want everybody on top of a mountain. And when people are in a hole, they're 2 steps away and you just lose everything. And she smiled and went, yes. Like because they're unconscious going to give me. And I'm telling you, Colin, she would not look at anybody or anything. She was the entire time after I said Exhorter-Teacher, her unconscious went, look at this guy. He's got it. He's got, like, her unconscious knows her intangible drivers. She would, everybody, and it was wild because what happened was they'd asked me to stay after to talk to her, and they had basically 2 government people there that are a support system. And then they had these 3 teachers and me and her, and they all were like, wow, she just, the minute you said Exhorter-Teacher, she was like this the entire time. And then when I explained it, they said, that is the first time we've seen her smile, like in a month. And then they started saying, you know what, when you're missing from the basketball team, they say they're missing their cheerleader because she likes to give a speech to exhort everybody and do all this stuff. Well, what's the situation? And she loves being in school. Why? Her mom was in jail. Her dad was disassociated from the family, alcoholic. She's 8th grade, so she's 13, 14. She's the oldest of 6 kids. She's essentially a single mom with 5 kids at 13 or 14. You think that's a exhorting environment to go to?
No.
She wants to be in school, but she goes home and she's just so unexhorted. She doesn't smile at all. So what happened was I said, let's rehearse a trigger. So the trigger I did was take a deep breath and ask for help. When you're starting to feel like you're going downhill, take a deep breath, ask for help. So what happened was apparently the next day they were in their circle time, and one of the kids was sharing. Now these kids all have, in fact, one kid had a letter from their dad in jail who they've never met. And they were reading the letter to the rest of the class. And and what happened was, the teacher sitting next to her was Compassion. And they said, normally we'd tell her to try to pump her up, and that would just set her off. The Compassion person went, wait. And she leaned over and said, hey, this is heavy stuff. Let me handle this. And after we're done, why don't you think of something to teach everybody so they're excited? Exhorter-Teacher, right?
Yeah.
She handled the situation. When it was over, they asked her, she taught them all something about herself to get them excited. Everybody's excited. They said, made it through the day. Best day she ever had. I showed up the next week. She was like, she wanted to talk with me after class. We sat there and talked, and she's like, I want to figure out what my mom is. She's going to be coming out of jail. I think and she said, give her, serve her, which made a lot of sense for why she was there. Again, givers and compassion. But she was like so smart, teach her how. And she had learned she was explaining the 7 to me again. And I explained all 7. And she was, I think my mom is this. And I said, does she do this? Yeah. I'm like, you are so smart. She's smiling. So what I did was they told her bus was there. She stayed 20 minutes after school to have this conversation. She was just so engaged. Everybody's like, we've never seen her like this. So I went to leave and I said, have a great day or whatever. And she went, why'd you say that? So this is the other thing I like to point out about intangible drivers is if somebody has been traumatized, if you speak to them, remember there's 49 options here, 7 hows, 7 whys. if you don't speak into their intangible driver, if you speak the intangible driver, they have energy. If you speak any one of the 48 ways, they progressively lose energy. If I just spoke to her the opposite of Exhorter-Teacher, she would have destroyed that room, which is why these people are causing triggering. I spoke to her like she was Exhorter-Server, and she wasn't going to have it. She instantly, why'd you talk like that? She was mad. And I'm sitting there going, oh, like I know better. And I went, I said that because you understood and I basically gave a reason why. And she went, okay, and pointed and waved goodbye. Like the minute I spoke to her Exhorter-Teacher, boom, she had energy, she smiled and waved goodbye. So that's where Exhorter-Server was just far enough away from her that she was not having any of it. And PTSD. But you can have that effect that immediately if you understand the mind and the brain and you understand that step one intangible driver, because then you can repair, these other thought processes.
So first stage is everyone gets their intangible drivers done, which they can get at flowcess.com. They can go on and they can have it on the website. They can contact yourself. They can contact myself. The next thing they do is they go over and rehearse their triggers. The next time this happens, I would like to physical and verbal mental response together. Yep.
Yeah, because when she raised her hand, she, later that they said that it was really easy for her to raise her hand, and then she followed through with asking for help and everything else, which she normally wouldn't.
So it's just these first two stages of everybody's life will change it. I will have to say that I had a couple of clients yesterday, and just while we're on the subject of exhorters, most exhorters watch the exhorter video and say, that's not me. That I don't feel like that's me. And my response was, that's what they all say. And it's not because any of us are bad. We just need to understand ourselves and our triggers and allow us to mute. So thank you so much, John. Thank you for today. I hope people understand that they can rehearse, into silence their triggers, because it's a massive, massive part of life. And it's something that they're not used to doing. And it's literally life-changing. So thank you so much. And I'll speak to you soon.
Bye.
Right. So I'll get that